41 Abbots Road, today, Wednesday, the 23rd of April, beginning at 10 a.m. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003, it has been directed that this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow a remote attendance by elected members. The meeting will be live streamed as well. Then can pass you on to Mr. Henderson for apologies.
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies submitted by Provost Bissett and Councillor Flynn, and I've been notified that Councillor Cawley will join the meeting later in the morning. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you for that. That takes us to item 2 on your agenda this morning. It's declaration of interest, and just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time? No, none submitted. That's fine. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 3 on your agenda, which is the minute of meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 12th of March 2025, pages 3 to 11. Is there any questions arising from that minute? None? Agree the minute?
Agreed.
Agreed. That's fine. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 4 on your agenda this morning. Construction of dwelling house at land at Hill End Farm, Mosscastle Road, Slamanan, for Mr. Barry Kelly. It's a continuation. It's pages 12 to 30, and the report is by our officer, Catherine Chorley. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Convener. Jim, if you could put up the site plan.
Catherine, can you just bring that microphone towards you, please?
Thanks, Jim. I'm aware that you will have all read the report, so I'll clarify some of the key details from it. And I'll start with the site history, which is set out in section 3. Planning permission was granted for the same design of house and location of house in 2013, but that permission expired without having been constructed or commenced. And at that time, the local plan was in place, and this site formed part of a much larger allocation for housing in the area. During consideration of the application in 2013, it was noted that Local Development Plan 1 was being produced but wasn't a material consideration at that time. As part of Local Development Plan 1, this site area was removed from the housing allocation. By the time we get to the current Local Development Plan 2, there is no allocation for housing in this area or in the wider area. There is still an allocation on Moss Road, but it's much, much smaller and further away. This site is not within the urban village limits, according to Local Development Plan 2. So there's been a really important policy shift since the time of the original planning permission. There's been a local plan, which has been superseded, Local Development Plan 1, which has been superseded, Structure Plan has been replaced, and Scottish Planning Policy has been withdrawn. So the current policies are National Planning Policy Framework 4 and LDP2. These now form the development plan. The site is not allocated. The urban village limits have been pulled right back. The permission is 12 years old, and because it hasn't been implemented, it no longer stands. Given the age and changes in policy, we are of the view that this is not a material consideration to the determination of this application. Now, you see in the report that the proposal complies with a number of various policies, and some of the non-compliant issues can be dealt with by condition, but the fundamentals of the house in this location are just not supported by the development plan that's in place at this time. I think I'll just go over some of those policies. So it would be things like policies related to tackling the climate and nature crisis, natural places, biodiversity and geodiversity, soils, sustainable transport, active travel, placemaking, local living in 20-minute neighbourhoods. It also doesn't comply with the fundamental policies related to the location of housing in the countryside. The policies which determine where housing should be developed do not support this application. Those include quality homes, countryside, rural homes, housing in the countryside. And on that basis, there are 5 reasons for refusal that are set out in the report. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much for that, Catherine. Okay, we'll open it up to members. Councillor Kerr? Billy Kerr?
Thanks, Convener. Catherine, I've just tried to get the one where you mentioned soils there. That's in number 3. Is that area used for growing or grazing? Do we know?
My understanding is the farmer uses it for grazing.
For grazing?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Obviously, the soils, I understand what you're saying about the soils and agricultural land. Okay, do we know why it didn't get started in 2013? Why it wasn't forward?
No, they haven't provided that information with the application.
Okay. Has there been any correspondence regarding, because I read in the report that there wasn't any details regarding to support the agricultural setting. Has there been any information from the applicant regarding the need for another house to support the farm?
No, there's no supporting information to justify the house in this location. There's no information on an agricultural use requiring an additional dwelling. The applicant has been asked for it, it's not been supplied.
Okay. That's fine at the moment.
Councillor Bowes?
Catherine, do we have a drawing? I get the drawings on page 30 here, which is just showing the red square. If we actually get a drawing of, I know sometimes we've got some things online, have we got a drawing of how that building will relate to the buildings to the west of it and the buildings to the south of it?
You mean in elevation or?
No, just on plan. At the moment, we've just got the red box, but I'm looking at here, and I'm not. There's certain rules about infill sites, and given that this lot is surrounded on the south and the west with other buildings, can we actually see where the house is going to go? Is it going to be sticking out to the north east corner of that section, or is it going to be in the southwest corner?
I've asked Jim to put up the location plan.
Switch glasses again.
Screen. So to the left of it, as you look at it, is the existing dwelling house, and then below where the words have got Hill End is the rest of the farm buildings.
Yeah. So without me declaring any decision, there is certain rules about infill sites, and looking at that, I'm asking the question: would that be considered an infill site?
There's no support for infill development in National Planning Policy 4. It sets out the locations where housing in the countryside is supported. I think if we were looking back towards our guidance on infill development, it needs to be between dwelling. Yeah.
Sorry, that's the question I was asking.
Yeah.
So the answer is no then. Thank you.
Bailey Kerr?
Probably leading on for Councillor Bows's question regarding the infill site, and understand that National Planning Framework 4 doesn't have it in it, but Local Development Plan 2 does. So the buildings across from the application, I know the farm because I lived in Slamanan all my days, so I know it's a big farm across from the normal house. So in the policy it says that if any of them can be converted into a home, it would be supported. There are no the structures that would be suitable for a home, and they're working sheds. They're just big sheds, so there's nothing that would allow us to look at that as in converting into a home. I feel that, as Councillor Bowes has already alluded to, that application forms part of that cluster of buildings. An infill site, probably no, but I think it could be justified as being part of the cluster of the full site. It's also mentioned regarding the road. If this application is refused, the same amount of traffic will go up that road as it would be if the application was approved. It's not the M25 we're talking about here. It's a road, single road going up to a working farm. That's just my views at the moment. I'll wait to see what my colleagues have come back in. Thanks, convener.
Thanks, Bailey Kerr. I'm looking online as well. Any questions? Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, convener. Following on from Bailey Kerr's query about the soils for agricultural use, Catherine, you said you hadn't had any information added to it. And I note in section 4, the application was not accompanied by sufficient information to allow full consideration of the application. The application did not include an adequate ecology statement. Policy would be contrary to the policies of natural places, etc. But this application goes back 12 years. Surely if someone was wanting an application to go forward, the easiest way for them to do so would be to provide the information. Is there information that can be gathered other than from the applicant? Are they on record or anything like that that would help the situation?
Through you, convener, they would need to do survey work in relation to the ecology impact, so potential for protected species. There wouldn't be sufficient information on records to determine what impact the development could have on protected species which are there at the present time or in the wider area.
It's just twice here it's saying that information hasn't been passed on, and surely the easiest way for us to adjudicate whether or not this application should go forward is for the information to be supplied. Thank you for that, Kath.
Is that you finished?
Thank you, convener, yes.
Right, thank you. Anybody else like to come in at this stage? I'm looking online as well. You put your light off, please,
Of course.
Councillor Forrest. Thank you. Okay. Okay, members, where obviously one of the areas Catherine had spelled it out at the very beginning in relation to the length of time it's been since this application has been granted initially in terms of material considerations. The fact that a site has already been granted planning permission in the past, to me, is relevant and it is a material consideration. But Catherine obviously spoke in relation to the changes in the local development plan, etc., since that particular time. So, how do members feel then on this one?
Thank you, convener. Right, I think the past application is not what we're here to look at. We're here to look at obviously this application, and given the recommendations and the numerous policies that actually doesn't comply with, what I was trying to be was fair with it to see if there was a potential somewhere for the gap fill, and I accept entirely what Catherine has said that it doesn't. It was the only thing I was thinking that this had, for me personally, had a reasonable chance of overturning the permissions. So with that, I am going to propose that we accept the officer's recommendations.
Okay, thank you. We got a seconder for that.
Happy to second.
Okay, just to clarify the situation, we'll have a motion moved and seconded to agree with the recommendations contained within the report. I'm looking down the line again. Does I see a light on? Councillor Forrest? Okay. I think Councillor Murtagh wanted in at this stage, and then Bailey Kerr.
Yeah, I had my light on earlier, but I was just going to move what Councillor Bouse moves. I do recognise that it is more complex because there was a planning application which was accepted previously, but I think that it's significant that we have to take note of the changes in planning policy, and obviously it was never started. And I think, well, I have sympathy with the position of the farm. You know, the planning policies are what they are, and I don't think there's enough to be able to overrule it in this case. So I would stick with the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Bailey Kerr?
Thanks, convener. Really appreciated the people who went to site to understand the layout of the application, and it's regrettable that the information didn't come forward. I would have liked the applicant to get an opportunity to bring more information forward. So understand what colleagues have been saying, understand that, but know everything's black and white. So I maybe not got a seconder. I propose that we continue to allow the applicant to bring the information forward to the plan officer.
Okay, you've heard Bailey Kerr. Is anybody who would like to second that or have a look at the situation that developed initially? No. Councillor Anslow.
Yeah, I'd like to quite happily second Bailey Kerr. I've actually visited the site, and I feel that, you know, wouldn't like them to lose opportunity over not supplying the evidence that we've asked for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this stage, I think I'll go back to the mover of the motion, Councillor Bowes. You've heard the amendment that's came forward. Does that change your mind in any way to allow a more time to bring forward additional information? How do you feel about that?
I think then additional information is purely on the wildlife thing, if I'm reading this rightly, and I don't think it's going to particularly change my mind on it. So I'm not really want to change my mind on it.
Okay, and I'll ask your seconder the same question.
I'm happy just to second the motion.
Okay, fine, thank you. Councillor Sinclair, did you want in at this stage, sir? Thank you.
Yeah, convener, just probably a question more for Catherine and the officers at this point, in relation to what's been discussed here. Could clarity be given on the timescales that there are for these applications coming through and the stages at which information is asked for? Because my concern is that this has already been moved to a continuation to allow for site visits. And then prior to that, there's been a full application stage to get the information that was required. So I just want more clarification on what the timescales are and at what stages the information would be expected to have been received.
Thanks, Convener. I would need to check when the application came in, but it's been in with us since last year, and we made a request for the information that was missing quite early on. They weren't willing to provide it, so we put it on the recommendation list to refuse. It was then called into planning committee, carried out the site visit, and now at a determination. So it's been at least since before last Christmas that we were asking for information.
Not that I want to mention Christmas out of context in April, since we're now just past Easter. That seems like a significant length of time, and if the information has been asked for very early on, and I think the word that you used there, Catherine, was weren't willing to provide that information, I'm not in favour of moving to a continuation on this occasion. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, sir. Anybody else like to come in at this stage? No. Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Convener. So where we are is we have a motion by Councillor Bowes, seconded by Councillor Kelly, to refuse permission in accordance with officer recommendations. We have an amendment by Bailey Kerr, seconded by Councillor Anslow, seeking to continue consideration of the matter to a future meeting of the committee in order to allow officers to seek additional information from the applicant. And can I just confirm that that included on need for an additional house to support the farm? Thank you, Bailey Kerr. So we have a motion and amendment, and one of these is a procedural amendment in this case, in which case our standing orders provide for a for and against vote at this stage on the procedural amendment solely, and depending on how that vote goes, if the vote was in favour of the procedural amendment, that is the decision taken. If it wasn't, matters revert to the original motion against which any further amendment can be made. So looking firstly at the procedural amendment by Bailey Kerr, seconded by Councillor Anslow, which I will repeat, is to continue consideration of the application to a future meeting of the committee to allow officers to seek additional information from the applicant, including information on the need for additional housing to support the farm. So I'll run through, and again, just for clarity, it's for or against the procedural motion. So Councillor Anslow.
Against.
Hold on. I think there's just been a wee bit much a lack of understanding there, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you. I'm happy to run through things again.
Yeah, thank you.
Our standing orders make provision that where there's a substantive motion, for instance, to grant or to refuse, against which there's a procedural motion or amendment, which is a bit like saying we want to go on holiday. Where will we go? Oh, will we go by train? It's a different is a different matter. So the standing orders require that where there's a substantive motion or amendment against a procedural motion or amendment, first of all, there's a decision taken on the procedural motion or amendment. So in this case, what the procedural amendment is to continue consideration for further information from the applicant. So what we're asking members at this stage is, are you in agreement, i.e. for the continuation, or are you against the amendment, which is in that case not to agree the continuation? So does that help to explain things for the committee? So for in this case means you're in agreement with the continuation, and against means you're not in agreement with the continuation taking place. And happy to answer any clarification questions of members.
Is everybody clear on that? Yep. Okay, Mr. Henderson will go back.
Thank you. And apologies, I realise it's a relatively unusual circumstance. So thank you. Councillor Anslow.
For.
And Provost Bissett is absent. Councillor Bowes.
Against.
Hayley Buchanan.
Against.
And I'm not sure if Councillor Colley's on the call at the moment. Can I just confirm she's absent at the moment? And Councillor Flynn is absent. Councillor Forrest.
Against.
Councillor Kelly.
Against.
Hayley Kerr.
For.
Councillor Murtagh.
Against.
Councillor Redmond.
Against.
And Councillor Sinclair.
Against.
So we have 2 votes for the continuation, the amendment as it was, and 7 against. So in this case, the procedural motion has been unsuccessful. So we revert to the substantive motion, which was by Councillor Bowes, seconded by Councillor Kelly, and that was to refuse the grant of permission in accordance with the officer recommendations. At this point, it is available for a further amendment should a member wish to make a further amendment.
Hayley Kerr.
Thanks, convener. I would have put an amendment in, but listen to the first vote. There's no much point, as it's not going to win. All we're going to do is delay time. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, convener. At this stage, there is simply a motion by Councillor Bowes, seconded by Councillor Kelly, and there's no amendment which has been placed against that motion. And we've completed the process of the procedural amendment. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we agreed to that. Anybody else like to come in at this stage? Are we agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you for that. That takes us to item 5 on your agenda this morning. Alterations, extension and change of use to existing garage to form 2 units for use for short-term less at 112 Mary Street, Lorison, Falkirk for TP Developments. It's pages 31 to 38 on your agenda papers, and the report is by Officer Mr. Kevin Brown. Thank you, Kevin.
Convener, this time I know usually at the start you ask for anybody wanting to go to sites. Obviously you hadn't said it today, and I would formally move that we go to sites to see the layout what's proposed
I'm happy to second you. How do other members feel at this stage?
Quite happy to both sites.
What about members online? We've got an opportunity for a site visit here proposed by Bailey Kerr. Everybody quite happy with that?
No objection.
Okay.
No objection here.
Okay then. Okay, Mr. Henderson. Thank you very much.
Unaccompanied site visit.
Unaccompanied site visit as usual, yep. Okay then, that takes us to item 6 in your agenda this morning. Construction of 2 dwelling houses part retrospective at land to the north of 4 Gangrew Cottage, Gangrew Road, Hags, for Mr. Sandy Brown. It's pages 39 to 65 and the report is by Brent Vivian. But before we bring in Brent, just to say that there's a deputation request has been made by Mr. Daniel Henderson, the agent, and the local member, one of the local members, Councillor Brian McCabe. So first of all, we agreed to listen to the deputation request from Mr. Henderson and Councillor McCabe.
Agreed.
Agreed to that. Fine. That's thank you. Now the report is by Brent Vivian. Brent, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, convener. Jim or Jim, there's a site layout plan. Perhaps if you could put that up first and foremost. There are other plans and photos as well, which we can refer to if need be at any time. That's the location plan. There's another plan which shows the site layout. This application seeks planning permission to construct 2 detached 2-storey houses. The site lies in Hags and is bounded by Gangrew Road to the east and houses at South Gangrew to the south. Works commenced on one of the houses last year and therefore the application is now partly retrospective. The site is accessed from Gangrew Road via an existing private track which descends steeply to the site. This access currently serves numbers 4 and 5 Gangrew cottages. The site lies mostly within the settlement boundary and mostly within allocated housing site H12 as defined in the local development plan. One of the houses straddles the settlement boundary and therefore lies partly within the countryside. As the site lies mostly within the settlement boundary and allocated housing site H12, it is considered reasonable to consider the application on this basis rather than as countryside development. There is an extensive planning history for the site, as outlined in section 3 of the report. There is a further planning application affecting this particular allocated site, and that's for the construction of 19 houses, and that application is also on today's agenda. The consultation responses are outlined in section 4 of the report. Roads Development Unit are concerned that the private access does not contain pedestrian facilities. However, this is considered acceptable given the limited number of houses it serves and the future intention for the site to be accessed by the new infrastructure for the wider development site. Children's Services have requested education contributions as the application is considered in the context of the wider H12 development site. Transport Planning Unit have requested contributions towards the M80 Hillside Road Slip Road Junction upgrade works and towards the Denny Eastern Access Road. One public representation and objection has been received, and the matters raised in this representation are summarised in paragraph 6.1 and considered in paragraph 7b.12. The recommendation is for committee to indicate that it is minded to grant planning permission, subject to the satisfactory completion of a Section 75 planning obligation to secure development contributions relating to education, transportation and open space. The contributions are applied at the rates set out in the Council's supplementary guidance or in accordance with current costings of the relevant project works and are not unusual or unexpected. The application has been called in by Councillor McCabe to allow the committee to consider what Councillor McCabe considers to be the inappropriate attachment of development contributions. This has been an area of concern for the applicant, and the application is supported by a development viability statement. The Council's supplementary guidance SG13 entitled Developer Contributions outlines the development viability process and how the Council will take into account viability issues. Step 1 of the process is preparation by the developer of a development viability statement. Step 2 is submission of the statement for the Council's consideration. If necessary, the Council will submit the statement to the District Valuer for independent verification. This was the process followed in this case, and the comments of the District Valuer are summarised in paragraph 4.8 of the report. In short, based on their analysis of the applicant's appraisal and typical assumptions regarding reasonable profit, typically 15 to 20%, the District Valuer has concluded that the development proposal is not viable. For further clarity and context, I would note the following from the District Valuer's report. The report clarifies that the District Valuer is not instructed to assess the Council's implementation of policy regarding development contributions, but to assess financial viability based on the proposed level of contribution. And secondly, the District Valuer report concludes that the site does face viability challenges and a reduction in developer contributions could be supported on the basis of financial viability, but highlights that ultimately the decision regarding levying developer contributions lies with the Council. As I stated, supplementary guidance SG13 outlines the development viability process and how the Council will take into account viability issues. I've mentioned steps 1 and 2 of that process already. Step 3, the last step of the process, is concerned with mitigating the costs of the contributions. Under step 3, if the Council accepts that developer contributions would make the development unviable, the Council will consider 3 options under a sequential approach. These options include reducing or waiving contributions. Review of the development viability statement by the District Valuer has been invaluable in verifying that it is not the developer contributions that are making the application unviable. The development is unviable before the costs of the contributions are even considered. Step 3 of the process is therefore not engaged in this case. Contributions cannot be reduced to a level that would make the development viable. SG13 also advises that defining viability can depend on whether the aim of the development is to generate financial return. In this case, the aim of the development is to provide, in this case, an aim of the development is to provide a new home for the applicant. As construction of this home is underway, the requested developer contributions have not inhibited the development from proceeding, and the phasing of payments potentially linked to occupancy could be considered as part of a Section 75 planning obligation. The applicant has made submissions that the requested developer contributions do not meet the tests set out in Scottish Government Planning Circular 3/20 2012 relating to planning obligations. These tests, including the applicant's detailed submissions, are considered in paragraphs 7A.24 to 7A.26 of the report. In short, the requested contributions are considered to meet the tests as they serve a planning purpose, relate to the impacts of the proposed development, are justified by the terms of the relevant policies of the development plan and supporting supplementary guidance, and relate fairly and reasonably in scale and kind, as they are calculated proportionately as per the rates set out in the Council's supplementary guidance and/or current project construction costs. We have officers from the Transport Planning Unit on hand to answer any questions in relation to transport contributions. We also have an officer in attendance who can answer any question regarding the open space contributions. The applicant has also asserted that the contributions should be considered based on the application being for a two-house development. This is not the correct approach for development within an allocated housing site. The Council's supplementary guidance clearly states that in considering whether developments will be exempt from education and open space contributions, the capacity of the whole site allocated in the LDP, of which the application site is part, will be used. This is to prevent avoidance of contributions through subdivision of allocated sites. My final point is to highlight policy 18 of NPF4. This policy promotes an infrastructure-first approach to land use planning, which puts infrastructure at the heart of good placemaking. Policy 18B states that the impacts of development proposals on infrastructure should be mitigated, and development proposals will only be supported where it can be demonstrated that provision is made to address the impacts on infrastructure. The minded to grant recommendation supports the infrastructure-first approach, whereas a decision to reduce or waive contributions would not. Thank you, Committee.
Thank you very much for that, Brent. Now it's an opportunity, first of all, for the local member, Councillor McCabe, to step forward. Okay, Councillor McCabe, you're well versed at this stage. You have 10 minutes, sir. Once you're finished, there will be an opportunity for members to ask any relevant questions to you. Thank you, sir. As soon as you're ready, the 10 minutes will start.
Thank you, Convener,
Thank you.
And good morning, everyone. I first contacted planning on the 28th of the 5th, 2024, 11 months ago, regarding this application. The issues I expressed at the time were the length of time already taken to assess the application, the developer contributions being sought appearing excessive for two houses. Two houses. Why such disparity with other local developments, and what could be done to progress approval as quickly as possible? I received a reply on the 21st of the 6th, 24, 3 weeks later, from Mr. Whittle apologising for the delay in responding. The reply indicated that developer contributions and viability were being considered, and I assumed an agreed resolution would be found. On the 9th of the 12th, 24, 6 months later, I emailed again after the applicant, this time a constituent, had attended my surgery. He'd contacted other local councillors, but was advised that they couldn't help as they were on planning. I contacted planning 6 months earlier and the application had still not been decided. I asked why, after 18 months, the application awaited approval. We are now at 22 months for 2 small houses. It's totally unacceptable. I was under the impression from Mr. Whittle's email that discussions were ongoing between planning and the applicant. This turns out not to be the case. Having spoken with Mr. Henderson, one of the agents, I'm told there's been a real difficulty in sourcing information from planners. Our planning service has repeatedly rejected offers to meet, and there's been no effort by planning to engage with the applicant to seek a conclusion. I myself tried to arrange a site meeting with Bernard or Brent to allow us to take in the sites at Cumbernauld Road and Kilsyth Road. I was keen to find out why developer contributions for Gangrew were required, yet these 2 sites were not. I'm still perturbed at the inequities with these 2 sites when compared with Gangrew. 2 sites larger than this application with zero contributions. That meeting was not forthcoming. Moving to developer contributions, let me quote, "Based on my analysis, this is not a viable development. Based on our analysis, the development faces a number of challenges and a reduction in developer contributions is supported on the basis of financial viability." That's not the view of myself or the applicant or the agent, but rather the independent district valuer appointed by Falkirk planners. Contained within the report of the district valuer is the extensive evidence of why this application is unviable and why developer contributions should be fair and considered. Indeed, the DV report actually recommends a reduction in contributions. Gross profit, valuation parameters, property information, house types, RIC professional standards, abnormals, GDV, construction costs, timescales, professional fees, sales and marketing, all are included within the district valuer's report. And yet that report is not included anywhere in the agenda papers. Why? You'll see a response to the district valuer report, but no report. Why should this be the case? Section 1.4 of the agenda states, you can have a look at it, the following information has been submitted in support of the application. The district valuer report, which supports the application, does not feature in the agenda. I find that exclusion disturbing. All relevant information for or against an application must be presented to the committee. Looking at the application history, the application for 2 small houses was submitted on the 15th of June 2023, 22 months ago. A building warrant was applied for on the 28th of March, 9 months after the application for planning approval. This came about entirely due to the lack of progress in the planning process. Any suggestion that the planning application be deemed retrospective is disingenuous. Moving to the site. The site is bordered by the M8 motorway. It's surrounded by steep embankments on all sides and is considered untendered brownfield. The site slopes significantly from the north to the south before plateauing towards Bonnywater. The site surface is uneven and lies several metres below Glen View Avenue to the north and Gangrew Road to the east, all as per the district valuer report, which you have now seen. The site is difficult and development costs will be substantial. Turning to the officer's report, let me be perfectly clear. Development contributions should be considered either morally or as a matter of policy. Is the application commensurate with the local development plan? Yes. Section 7B11, and I state, I quote, "No objections to the application have been raised in the responses. The application complies with all planning terms." And I quote, "The district valuer services has advised that the development proposal is unviable even without the contributions." Now refer you to section 7B10 within the report, the second bullet point. And I'll quote, apologies for having to quote here. "Given that the district valuer typically assumes a range of 15 to 20% of GDV as a reasonable profit, the development proposal is not considered viable even if developer contributions are not levied. It is therefore not solely the developer contributions that are making the development unviable. Under the terms of the Council's development viability process, step 3 of this process is only considered if the Council accepts the developer contributions would make the development unviable. Based on the conclusions of the district valuer, it is not accepted that this is the case, as the development is considered unviable before the costs or contributions are even considered. I'm sorry, but the logic of the Council totally escapes me here. What appears to be being said, we know that the development is unviable. We know that the development becomes even more unviable if we add in development contributions. But it's not only development contributions that make the project unviable, therefore we're going to add the contributions anyway. It's mental, it's crazy, it defies logic. Can anybody explain the officer's position? Section 7B 10, the fourth bullet point. Contributions cannot be reduced to a level that would ensure that the development remains viable. This is because the development proposal is unviable even without the contributions. That's exactly the point. Why is it not being accepted? Section 7B10, the sixth bullet point, again, refer to your agenda paper. It is not considered that there are very exceptional circumstances to support waiving the contributions in this instance. I cannot believe that statement. All evidence is to the contrary. All evidence supports waiving the contributions. Section 7B10, the seventh bullet point. SG 13 states that for private developments, the Council will assess viability using the residual valuation approach. This is the approach used by the district valuer in concluding that the development is not viable, even without contributions. So the DV's approach is exactly the same as the Council's. Then why are we proposing an alternative solution? It beggars belief. Section 7.4b states, the Council recognises that there may be occasions when not all required developer contributions can be met without compromising the overall viability of the particular development. There's extensive evidence, not the least of which the DV report, which supports this position.
Final minute, sir.
Why are we thank you, Convener. Why are we pursuing a position contrary to Council policy? Section 7B5 contends that step 3 is mitigating the cost of contributions. Under step 3, as the Council accepts the developer contributions would make the development unviable following considerations of a verified development viability statement. The Council would consider the following options in turn. I've got so much more here. Let me just say, I'm minded to compare the apparent position of officers to that of a fat, obese child who just can't say no to another cream cake, despite being told that reaching for the cake will cause the other cakes to immediately disappear and be taken off the table by the parents. Officers are pushing for the developer contributions, the cake, which will only cause the contributions, the cake, and other cakes, local jobs, council tax take, planning warrant fees, increase in the housing pool, to be taken off the table by the parents, the applicant. The development won't go ahead. The applicant has already invested circa 360k in this and other development proposals for the site. I ask that the committee see common sense and approve the application in accord with the officer's recommendation, and I quote section 7C1, I quote, the application is considered overall to accord with the development plan for the reasons detailed in this report. Thanks very much for your indulgence.
No. Thank you very much. Okay, just sit there, and I'm sure that there'll be many questions coming at you from members both here and online. Councillor Bowes. Yes, on you go. Fine.
Is someone in the room speaking or is the microphones maybe not on?
Brian's just wanting a break for a second.
All
Just
right,
get some
sorry.
water.
My apologies.
Or Coke.
Right, before Councillor Bowes comes, we'll just ask or some clarification to Mr Henderson at this stage.
Thank you, Convener. In the case of deputations, you're quite correct. There is a period of up to 10 minutes allowed for questions by members of the deputy. I would just note that that is questions and it's not the point at which the merits of the case or the application would be discussed by members. And just to read the standing orders, any member can put a question to the deputation that is relevant to the subject matter. The total time for such questions will not usually exceed 10 minutes. The merits of the case must not be discussed by members until the deputation is withdrawn. So it is questions, clarifications, etc., but not straying into discussion of the merits of the application. Thank you, Convener.
Councillor Bowes.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe, I'm sure you were in no way meaning to be disrespectful to council officers. Section 75 payments are laid down in law and anything that's due in that, and they're tied by constraint on Section 75 payments. So my question to you is, and I'm just trying to get to exactly what you're asking us to do here. You're asking us to grant, but you're asking for, you don't want the £11,000 to bank your school, £6,000 to Denny High, £4,000 to nursery provision, £4,000 Slip Road, £273 at the Deer, and 2,800 improvements to our local space area. Am I right on that?
I'm just asking you to accept the district value report, which says that developer contributions make this project unviable. Why do we go for expert opinion and then disregard it? And by the way, I do not like the inference. I do not like the inference that I'm criticising officers. I'm here in a scrutiny role.
On Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, hopefully, Brian, it was just one of a couple of words that you used, and I would never expect you to criticise officers at all.
Light, it's difficult to see down there.
Thanks, Convener. Councillor McCabe stated at the start that you asked for a site visit. Did you receive that site visit?
No, I didn't, Billy Kerr, thank you.
Do you know why you didn't receive it?
I've no idea why, but if I may add, you're aware that I forwarded some information as background to my deputation here. Falkirk Council were found guilty of not conforming with providing information by the Scottish Information Commissioner, and the applicant, one of his agents, was provided with an apology and eventually provided with the information. And that information was the district value report. I'm trying to highlight here, Bailey Kerr, there has been a genuine lack, and I don't like to say this, I'm trying to improve services within Falkirk Council. You need to remember, we've just been through a budget process where we're really struggling for cash. We need to be looking to be trying to be more proactive and encouraging development. I would have hoped that the officers would have met me on site to discuss some of these issues. Sorry to take that length of time.
That's fine, thank you very much. Something that I go on about all the time about is people's lives we're dealing with here, and I mention it every meeting. He says that they've highlighted the 22 months that application's been in. Do you feel that 22 months is acceptable for to wait for an answer?
Again, as we're repeatedly told, I do accept exactly as you say, Billy. Yeah, this is people's lives we're talking about here. And there's two houses involved in this particular application. One of them is for the applicant himself. That's how immediate the effect is. What was the second part of your question, Billy?
You think 22 months is
22 months. 22 months is, depending on the project, yeah, I could see, why things could take 22 months. This is for 2 houses. This is for 2 houses. This should be passed within 6 weeks. That's how poorly I think the applicant's been served by it.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. I'll have more questions for officers. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Billy Kerr. Looking down the line and online, any questions coming? Councillor Redmond.
Thanks. I think the first question I had was, it's coming up as a part retrospective application, and I think you were saying you disagreed with that. Could you maybe expand on that a bit more? What is? It seems like there's work there, but it used to be a garage. Have they already demolished the garage and started building the houses? Could you maybe expand a bit on your opinion of that?
Yeah, certainly, Councillor Redmond. Typically what you do is you apply for planning approval or planning permission. You're granted planning permission. You'll apply for a building warrant for the kind of structural side of things, the technical side of things, if you like. What happened on this occasion is, forgive me if I can't find the exact dates, but let me just see where. Yeah. The application for the 2 houses was submitted on the 15th of June 2023. A building upon warrant was applied for on the 28th of March 2024, 9 months after the submission of the planning application. I've no knowledge of this, but what I would suggest is potentially the applicant has felt frustrated and has wished to maybe push on, applied for the building warrant, been awarded the building warrant, and has then started to carry out work. The application, when it was made, was not a retrospective application. It's only now, due to officers potentially, I don't know, they maybe have gone out on site, saw that there's been some building work there and went, oh, this is a retrospective, let's go for 25% increase in fee. I don't know. Pure conjecture.
Thanks. And the other question I had, it sort of follows on a bit for Councillor Bowsey's point, but your constituent, have they got a kind of maybe a figure in mind or an amount in mind or a percentage even that they would feel would be a fair reduction in there? Because I think when I calculated everything up, it's £28,549 for, I don't know if that's per house or if it's for both the houses, but have they got maybe a sort of level they're looking to have that reduced to?
I don't know if I can really answer that question, Councillor Redmond. Again, all I'll do is refer you to the district value report. Now, these are the experts. This is what they deal in day by day. It comes back and says they suggest on this application a reduction in developer contributions. What I will highlight is something that I did mention during my presentation, where there was another 2 applications, not more than 400 or 500 metres along from this site. 2 of the applications, one was an application for 6 houses. This application's for 2. Another one was for an application for 4 houses. This one's for 2. And do you know how much developer contribution they paid? 0. Why do we have this disparity with? And by the way, the houses that are being built on the other 2 sites are much larger than these 2 small houses. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Redden.
Yeah, thanks, that's perfect. Cheers, Councillor McCabe.
Councillor Murtagh.
I didn't actually have my hand up, convener. I probably got questions for officers, but maybe since you've prompted me, this is a very compelling case that Councillor McCabe you made there. What I'm wondering is, notwithstanding the last question you just introduced about the disparity with other sites, that comparable housing sites or larger housing sites having less contributions, I suppose what I'm kind of struggling with is that the consideration, what you're asking for is that that effectively accept the district valuer has highlighted mitigating circumstances where we would consider removing the contribution in order to make the site viable. But I suppose what I want to ask you is, have you considered in our deliberation about whether a site is appropriate to go ahead at all, that's part of the consideration? So for example, if there was, have you considered that if the site is not appropriate, is not viable without with the contributions removed, it's just not viable at all then, and actually the committee should be considering actually that the recommendation should be different? What have you thought about from that perspective?
It's a difficult question to answer, Councillor Murtagh. The difficulty of the site and the potential profit available to any developer would be entirely down to the developer, I would suggest. What I will, something you did, you've provoked in me, whereas I'm saying that no developer contributions should be levied against this site. What I will state is that when Mr. Henderson, the agent for Mr. Brown, comes up, he'll be able to give you the specific details of it. But the applicant and the agent were prepared to enter into a planning obligation agreement to give some contribution. For the life of me, don't ask me what that figure is. But voluntarily, they were prepared to enter into a planning obligation agreement, which I understand was rejected by our officers. That's a question you may wish to follow up, Councillor Murtagh, with Mr. Henderson once he brings forward his deputation.
Okay.
Councillor Sinclair.
Thanks, Convener. Councillor McCabe, could you clarify what it is specifically that makes the development unviable according to the DVS report?
The first question I would say is, why don't you have this report? Why don't you have that report in front of you? It should have been part of the agenda papers.
Councillor McCabe, McCabe, sorry, that's not the question I asked. The question I asked was, can you clarify what it is specifically that makes the development unviable according to the DVS report?
Off the top of my head, no, I can't. I'll read the report and get back to you.
No, I've got information here at 4.8 within the planning report that's in front of us today. DVS have advised that the submitted development viability statement, as amended and agreed with the DVS, estimates that the development proposal would return a profit in the region of 2.93% of gross development value, and in the region of 10.24% of GDV if developer contributions are not levied. They typically assume that a range of 15 to 20% of GDV is reasonable profit. It goes on to suggest that, based on their analysis of the amended appraisal provided by the applicant and their typical assumptions regarding reasonable profit, DVS conclude that if the development proposal is not viable, that's before costs are included, including developer contributions. So in that case, would you concur then that the application itself is unviable without those costs? And as Councillor Murtagh alluded to in her questioning, that the development should therefore be receiving a different recommendation from this committee?
Do you want to answer that one, Councillor McCabe?
Not particularly, because I don't understand the question. I'm being perfectly honest.
So let me rephrase. If the DVS have said that this site is unviable with it, even before developer contributions are included, that the application is unviable in its totality and therefore should perhaps be reconsidered as, rather than minded to grant, minded to refuse. Would that be your opinion on that reading?
I can't answer that. I mean, that's a question for officers. That's the question for planning. I mean, why have they come forward with a recommendation and now members of the committee want to change that. I'm really at a loss to find the logic in the council's position here.
Okay. Any other questions, Councillor Sinclair?
No, that's enough from me.
Any other member, any questions to Councillor McCabe before we bring Mr Henderson in? I'm looking away up the line here, it's difficult for me. Councillor Forrest.
Thanks. Councillor, I appreciate you've done a lot of work with this. And you spoke earlier about, we've just went through a budget. We know that we need the money from whatever source. Now, developer contributions are not a tax. Basically, it's their way, the way of a developer has of subsidising the infrastructure. Now, without that subsidy from the developer, it means that the council is paying the full amount. I take it you're not against developer contributions, except in this case.
No, not at all.
No. So it's just in this case.
No, totally reverse.
So you're against developer contributions fully?
Not at all.
No?
No.
So, but you are on this occasion.
I'm asking you to go by the recommendations of the
No, I'm asking you about your opinion, because you've stated your opinion several times. So I'm asking you what your opinion is. Are you against developer contributions? And you've just said no.
No, I'm not against developer. Am I against?
But you are on this occasion.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
As has been outlined by recommendations, and again, with your indulgence, convener, this may answer Councillor Sinclair's question. Under 4.16 of the DVS report, based on my analysis of the amended appraisal provided by the applicant, this is not a viable development. Key issue affecting viability is potential sales value in the subject location are modest, while development costs, including an allowance for abnormal costs, are high, reflecting recent inflationary pressures.
Okay. Is Councillor Forrest, you finished, sir? Okay, is there any other member here or online would like to ask any questions of Councillor McCabe before he goes? I'm just going to say one or two things, Councillor McCabe. In relation to the main issue here, in terms of the payment of financial sums towards this development, 11,286, 5,989, 4,018, 4,179, 273,000, 2,800. That's quite a considerable sum, as you keep saying, for two houses. The issue you brought up in terms of the other sites along the Kilsyth Road, did you clarify the issue? Did you ask questions to officers in relation to the possibility of why developer contributions weren't asked for on these two occasions?
That was part of the reason for trying to arrange a site visit, so that I could have the details brought out at that. I think I may have asked convener again, so much information here. Okay. I did ask the question. I may not have had received an answer to that.
Okay. Well, I would say this at this stage before you go back, that in terms of the time in this council, the possibility of having to pay the amount of these contributions, the issue in terms of the two houses, and there'll be a number of questions going to be asked to your officers in relation to one or two issues being brought up just now. Other than that, I'd like to thank you very much for your contribution. I'd like you to retake your seat and give an opportunity for the applicant's agent, Mr Henderson, to step forward.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr Henderson. You'll have 10 minutes, sir, the same as Councillor McCabe, and then there'll be an opportunity when you finish your summary for questions from members both here and online. 10 minutes will start when you're ready, sir. Put your microphone on. Just press the middle there.
Here,
Yep.
that me, off and on.
Yeah.
Right, okay. I'll start by trying to put a wee bit of clarity onto some of the points raised by Councillor Redmond, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Murtagh, and sorry, I've not been at many council meetings for years, so I'm not too sure about names.
Yes, fine.
But what's important to understand is that when you're talking about viability, you're talking about 15 to 20% of profit. So if a project's £1 million, the developer viability is 150,000 to 200,000, right? Now, the bottom line is viability and making a profit aren't the same. Sandy Brown's sitting up there. Sandy Brown will work on a 10% or 7%, 6% profit even. He can work on a cheaper basis. So you can have a project that's perfectly viable. This man can make money and build houses, but he'll still not be meeting the development viability criteria of 15 to 20% that is used. So that's where the viability comes in there. The two developments along the road, the 4 house at Field View and the 6 house along at Glen Etive, they paid £800 a house at Glen Etive and £868 per house at Field View. What's been asked for here is, once you add affordable housing on, will be in excess probably of £20,000 for houses, small houses that will have a value of about £250,000. This is no Cala Homes £500,000 houses that are paying £20,000. They can cope with that, but you can't cope with it on a small development of 2 small houses, and that's, I think that answers most of the questions there. I can come back to that. So onto my presentation, if I can do that. Good morning, convener, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dan Henderson. I'm a retired consultant acting for Sandy Brown, the guys up there. I've contacted the Chief Governance Officer in the legal section to inform them that both of the handling reports are fundamentally flawed, lack balance, and are not fit for purpose. The most serious shortcomings are the deliberate decisions taken not to list the District Valuer's report as background papers and make them readily available to you, the Planning Committee. And most important, frankly, the disgraceful and totally unacceptable decision not to include the recommendations of the District Valuer in the handling reports. In short, the Planning Service has decided not to tell the Planning Committee about the District Valuer's recommendations because they're not in this handling report. For the record, the District Valuer report regarding the 2 house application states the site does face viability challenges, and it recommends a reduction in contributions could be supported on the basis of financial viability. That is the recommendation that the District Valuers made about this 2 house application. It's not in that report, and the first time it's been mentioned by planning was when Brent spoke 15 or 20 minutes ago. The 19 house report that's coming up next, the District Valuer report says a complete reduction in developer contributions, in short, 0 financial contributions is what's recommended by the District Valuer. The reports are here, anybody can look at them. I've got a timeline of what's all happened with the District Valuer here. I'll answer all the questions you want. Turning back to the 2 house application, the weekly list and the handling report both recommend approval, and the key issues that require to be settled is developer contributions. From the very outset, we advised planning the contributions requested would render the development unviable. Local development plan policy states when assessing applications, the developer contributions, where developer contributions are required, economic viability will be taken into account. No maybe,
economic viability will be taken into account. That's Falkirk Council policy. So, as Brent's explained, we submitted a development viability statement to justify our position. Planning then submitted the statements to the district valuer for independent verification. Our statement has been verified by the district valuer, who, in recommending the reduced contribution, stated the key issues facing viability are that sales values in the area are modest, while development costs and abnormals are high. The handling report summarises the district valuer's report, but the summary is a disgrace because the planning service has made a deliberate decision not to include the district valuer's recommendations. Again, not to tell the committee. If the district valuer recommendation about reductions in developer contributions were included in the handling report, the recommendation by planning to increase the level of developer contributions wouldn't make any sense. The recommendation by planning and the claim that mitigation of the effect of the development contributions should not be considered should not have made any sense either, because they totally contradict the independent recommendation of the district valuer. As the district valuer states, the development's unviable. The guidance on how mitigation of the cost of contribution should be determined must be applied. And that's when we come to the three choices. And the three choices are deferring payments. It will certainly not work with this application. The second choice is reduce contributions. And that's what the district valuer is saying. The district valuer is saying the contribution should be reduced. I'll read it out in the report. Now, just going on a wee bit. So, the district valuer has recommended a reduction in contributions could be supported on the basis of financial viability. And what I'm saying here is it's respectfully requested that the two-house application should be granted planning permission subject to the terms of a Section 69 agreement contained within a unilateral planning obligation that we've submitted. Now, one of the councillors was asking what should be paid here, right? Now, we've submitted a unilateral planning obligation offering to pay contributions. Contributions for the slip roads and contributions for the deer. I'm not saying we agree with them, but we're trying to compromise and we're making an offer of contributions. And the reason we've made this offer of contributions is because Ian Henderson and Brent Vivian agreed the exact same thing with the two developments that Brian McCabe was just talking about. The four-house application at Fieldview paid £868 a house. The six-house application along at Glen Etive, which was my Uncle John's old building yard, paid £800 a house. All I'm asking with this for Sandy Brown is that he pays the same as these applications a few hundred yards along the road. That's all we're asking for this two-house application, that we pay the same as other people. Now, moving on for that. Policy 18 of NPF4 has been mentioned, right?
Final minute, Mr. Henderson.
Right,
Final
minute. I'm going to run out of time because I tried to explain things at the start. But I'm going to tell you this. For policy 18 and for the developer contributions, planning obligations policy, there are 5 tests. And these tests relate to they relate to the affordability, they relate to what a development can reasonably accommodate. In any case, I'll come back to this, but the tests are failed. The tests are failed, so the developer contributions they're not proportionate, that's it. And the tests are failed because the tests are failed because the district valuers told us here that this development cannot cope with what they're asking for. And when it comes to the 19-house application, the whole thing the district valuer says nothing. They can't cope with it. And when I speak about the 19 houses, I'll explain in much more detail why that's the case. I'm sorry if I'm a wee bit...
No, that's your time, and as I say, we can understand that, but obviously you'll appreciate as members, we're taking each application on its own merits. Thank you.
I do, Councillor.
No, thank you. Right, can I come in with the first question before members come in? Obviously, a lot has been said about the district valuer's report. There's a lot of questions that we'll need to ask officers. That's the main issue. But in terms of, we need any member coming in now, it's direct questions to the summary to Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, you spoke 2 or 3 times regarding the fact that you have made offers in relation to what you would like to pay. You can't outline them in relation to what we've got in front of us just now, what the council's got.
Oh, I've got copies of them across there.
Aye, but in terms of the fact of the matter is that when we talk about the amounts we've got in the recommendations, about 11,286 towards the Gangrew Primary, 5,809 for Denny High, 4,000 towards improvements to the local nursery, 4,000 towards the cost of the slip road. And at the end, so have you got a list then of what you've offered?
A unilateral planning obligation was submitted to the council 5.5 months ago, offering to pay the roads contributions and the deer contributions. The rest, nil. Because the district valuer, one reason, because the district valuer says it's no justified, right? The contribution should be reduced, and because what we're offering to pay is exactly the same as was agreed by the council's planning officers and the council's legal officers. The unilateral planning obligation that we have offered is identical to what was paid at Field View, 500 yards along the road, and Glenative, 600 yards along the road. So we're offering to pay exact. And one last thing, these developments are twice the size of Sandy Brown's development in terms of the properties, and also they are.
Right, you're okay for that. Okay, I'm going to bring other members in at this stage. It's questions directly only to Mr. Henderson regarding his summary. Any questions regarding issues that's been brought up regarding officers, there'll be an opportunity to ask officers. This is a stage for questions to Mr. Henderson about his summary. Anybody like to come in at this stage? No? Oh, Councillor Forrest.
Thanks, Mr. Henderson. You said that you would like parity with these other 2 developments. 800 and...
Sorry?
800 and how much?
£868 and £800. Exactly what they are per house.
Right. So that's total is £1,600. Yeah?
No, 868 times 2 is £1,736.
Sorry, 17. Yeah, okay. So that's that. Plus, you've said that you would pay the road contributions, which are...
Well, that is the roads and the deer contributions.
So you would pay £1,700 instead of £4,453.57 in total.
See, what we're offering to pay is exactly the same as was paid at Field View. The 2 applications were submitted 3 days apart. So basically, I'm saying that this is a fair amount to pay because these 2 applications were submitted 3 days apart. What's the difference?
Okay.
What's the difference?
Well, I didn't make the contribution,
sorry.
Obviously.
Sorry.
You know, so I don't know what the difference are. I don't know what was going through the valuer's mind. But remember, the valuer is separate from us.
You want me to tell you what the difference is? Right. Okay. No, it wouldn't be my opinion. It's a statement of fact. I'll explain the difference if you want.
Any further questions to Mr. Henderson, or can Mr. Henderson retake his seat? Okay, Mr. Henderson. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Oh,
No, you're fine.
sorry if I get a wee bit
No, we can understand.
fired up
We,
there.
we
It's
can
frustrating
understand.
when somebody's business and life's about to be destroyed.
Okay then, thanks to both representatives, Mr. Henderson and Councillor McCabe. Now, Councillor Kelly.
Yeah. I'm very uncomfortable with this whole thing. That there are things that we haven't really seen, the DVS report. We haven't even seen the sites. So I'm going to ask for a continuation of this meeting. Do we do a site visit and ask for the DVS report, or for a member of the DVS to come along to be questioned at the meeting, so that we can get the definitive reasons for their report? If I can get a seconder for that.
I'm quite happy to second you. I think it would be appropriate. Councillor Bowes.
Convener, I'm just checking something, and it's not really a question to Brent, but if I seem to remember, Brent summarised the DV report, and I think he said that the project wasn't viable before any cost put on, and so taking it off isn't going to make the project viable, as I'm sure was the summary that Brent gave us earlier on.
Having said that, I think that it was pointed out by it was the agent, I'm not sure, or Councillor McCabe, that because it's a small developer who's willing to accept a smaller profit on it, so is it viable?
Okay, well, just to clarify the situation, we've got a motion moved and seconded for a continuation to allow a site visit and for a copy, did you say, the DBL report? Okay, is there anybody otherwise minded? Mr. Henderson.
Thank you for
Convener, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I think myself and Councillor Redmond have got some questions. I think I'd quite like to ask some questions before I make a decision about whether I am otherwise minded, if you know what I mean. Because I think
okay, then
is that right?
We'll come to you first then. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to see your wee hand up here. No, don't you be sorry. So it's yourself first for questions, and then Councillor Redmond, then we'll come back to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Councillor Kelly said in terms of I have a feeling of being very uncomfortable with some of the discussion and with some of the detail, and that I don't have everything quite straight in my mind in terms of making a decision. But I wonder, can I ask Brent this question about that we've heard over and over about why comparable sites are asked for different contributions, and it's been the information that's been given is that those applications went in very close to one another, therefore maybe some other things that I might have assumed in the past about why that was different, maybe not. So can you give an answer as to why the contribution level is so different between the different sites that are being quoted?
Good question, Brent.
Yeah, we need to be clear that in these cases, we're not necessarily considering like for like. Yes, this is an application for 2 units, but it's part of a larger allocation. It's part of H21. So we're talking about an allocation with a relatively significant number of units. We've got a live application for 2 units. We've got another live application for 19. There's a planning permission for a single unit within this allocation, and there's also an indication of a phase 2 development of another 14 units. So in total, we're talking about an allocation with over 30 units. But to the 2 sites down the road, which have been mentioned, one was for 4 units and the other was for 6. So we're talking about a different scale of development, which naturally would trigger different contribution requirements. For instance, for an open space requirement, that doesn't come into play until you reach a threshold of 10 units. So the contributions play out differently according to the scale of development. I think the other point to note is the transportation contributions on the other two sites were relatively modest, but obviously that's a wee while ago now. So, you know, costs have increased. So the relative contributions now for transportation has increased, you know, quite significantly. And that's reflected in the difference in the sums requested in the recommendation today, as opposed to the sums that were agreed for those other two applications, which were a number of years ago now. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does help. It explains part of it. And I think, so I suppose my question is maybe from a legal perspective from Mr. Henderson, I don't know. In terms of, like, obviously we know we do each site on its merits, and I totally understand that it's been explained about seeing this two-house application, which we're deciding on, as part of a larger allocated site, and why then there's been a difference in the way it's been looked at. But the question that was kind of brought up in the discussions about the viability, you know, we've heard that the district valuer report saying that on the current measures, it's not a viable application with even without developer contributions, but with the level of developer contributions, and there might be scope to reduce that. Can you remind me about, when we're thinking about planning considerations, the weight that we can give or should be giving to the viability success of the overall development when we're considering whether to grant an application or not?
That's another good question. Mr. Henderson, you're going to come in with that one?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Murtagh. Just looking at some of the points in turn, I think, as Brent had noted, the two houses are part of an allocated site in the current development plan, which does bring certain considerations around cumulative impact, etc. So you could, for example, have a site of 25 houses allocated in the plan. You receive applications of 3 houses repeatedly. The expectation would be that you could still justifiably obtain developer contributions that would then effectively cover the impact on the infrastructure in the area of the development of that site. In terms of the next point, I think perhaps something you were picking up was in relation to the DV report. And I've noted all the comments that have been made in relation to the recommendation, and I think as Mr. Henderson and Councillor McCabe have said, the recommendation does note that the site faces challenges, and a reduction in developer contributions could be supported on the basis of financial viability. That, I think, as Brent mentioned earlier, is couched in that same sentence. Ultimately, the decision regarding levying developer contributions lies with the council. And in terms of the district valuer's notes for the purposes of valuation, he does say, for clarification, we're not instructed to assess Falkirk Council's implementation of policy regarding developer contributions, but to assess financial viability based on the proposed level of contribution. So that then leads down the road of the Supplementary Guidance 13 and the provisions around viability. Perhaps my planning colleagues can assess around the weight that would be put on viability, but viability, I just from my experience, could be a relevant consideration if there was a concern that you start a development and then financially it fails and it's left incomplete. That said, I think what we're hearing from the applicant's agent here is that the normal viability levels of 15 to 20% don't apply, and it's a landowner building out on his own property and including a property for himself. So I think in that case, the viability point of a development not going ahead is perhaps less. And I suspect that's the reason why the planning officers have recommended grant of permission. It's in an allocated site, it meets the terms of the development plan, but have then considered the district valuer's report. But in trying to apply the supplementary guidance and probably having regard to infrastructure need in the area, have determined that they would recommend that contributions are applied to any grant of permission. But I don't know if my planning colleagues might have anything to add to that, and indeed if I have answered the question that you had asked, Councillor Murtagh, hopefully so.
I'm just waiting to see if anybody from planning comes in.
Ian's done a really competent summation there. And then it's quite right. The district valuer has come to a conclusion, made a recommendation, but from our point of view, that's not the be-all and end-all. We then have to consider that recommendation in the context of the policy which we apply. In this case, it's the sequential test under supplementary guidance 13, which applies to the development viability process. And it's quite clear within those tests that you only go on to consider the opportunity to waive or reduce contributions if it is the contributions themselves that are making the development unviable. And it's quite clear from the advice from the district valuer that the development is unviable even without the contributions. So, in terms of how we look at it, we are constrained by the terms of the guidance that we follow, and that is how it's that's how it plays out in terms of the recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that point and that last point you make is like, I understand it. I understand it from a logical flowchart point of view in my mind. But I do have sympathy with the argument that is being made in terms of, well, if it's not viable without it, then it's not going to make it more viable with it. It makes it even less viable. But I understand the rule application that we can only consider that if it was the developer contributions themselves that were making it unviable. I get that, but I do see the point. I think that is quite important that the strict application of the rule is what's happening here. I don't have a problem with that, because that's what the rules say. But I can understand why the logic overall would be questioned by the applicant and by Councillor McCabe. I have sympathy with that. What I was going to go on to ask, in terms of the fact of the developer contributions, now the roads have been mentioned, also the schools have been mentioned. I know Mr. Teed's on the call. I mean, I think the material point for us considering as a committee is that obviously if the applicant is not to pay developer contributions, then the infrastructure that we require to support citizens then falls on the council to pay. And obviously it has been assessed that the schools would require contributions. So I don't know if Mr. Teed could give us what's behind the assessment, and that if, for example, this is an allocated site and would be further developed, the impact it would have on schools and the potential cost that it would have to the council, if that's basically going to be liable on us.
Mr. Teed there. Mr. Teed, you've heard the question.
I heard the question, thanks. I think it's all covered, Councillor Murtagh, in section 7826 of we've covered the capacity risks in some detail and the implications. I mean, I know we take applications on their individual merit, but from a when we're looking at infrastructure contributions, we look across the board at all developments in the area, local plan allocations and current permissions, and we assess the impact of all of those collectively, and that's where we've come to the conclusions in terms of of the contribution requirements, the pro rata contribution requirements. In terms of the actual figures that we asked for, that's assessed based on the expected number of pupils per house and on the anticipated costs, and that's a figure that's derived from the Scottish Futures Trust school building cost, and we've indexed that appropriately over time. So we're confident that it reflects the actual cost per property. When, you know, say if there are 500 houses allocated in local housing developments, that you know, each one of those houses represents a particular cost. And because this two-house development is part of a larger development, as Brent's explained, that's in the local plan, it was considered to be within the threshold for developer contributions for school infrastructure. I hope that answers the question.
It does. I think, and obviously I've got the report. I think it's just important that this is teased out and highlighted in the questioning, because obviously it's important for the developer and also for the public to see the transparency of this and how this actually works. So I think that's the question. You know, the council will become liable for the infrastructure cost if we can't recoup them from the developer. I might have other questions later in the debate depending on what happens, because there's a lot of information there. But yeah, I'll leave it at that just now. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you for your input. Councillor Redmond, followed by Councillor Bowes. Thank you, Councillor Redmond.
Thanks. I think I would just start by saying that, you know, I've got a lot of respect for our planning officers and our planning team, and, you know, in my dealings with them, they've been absolutely professional, and I think they, you know, I really respect their opinion, and I think they do a good job. So I was maybe a wee bit uncomfortable with some of the things that have been said, but getting into the questions, I think Councillor Mutter covered a few of them. We had, I suppose it was, the first one was on the kind of contributions, and I do think these are, you know, these are probably the highest contributions I've seen in my time in the committee. But how are they worked out? Like, how do we say a school in say the Braes needs 3,000 and then a school in Banknock needs 5,000? What's the sort of mechanism for working that out?
Mr. Broadley.
I'll defer this to my colleague, Mr. McNair, who's sitting beside me.
Perfect.
You've heard a lot of mention today, members, from both the applicant and their agent and officers to Supplementary Guidance 13, and that's an infrastructure note which is approved by Council Executive and then referred to the Scottish Ministers for approval. So that's not officers have been involved in that, and it's been through scrutiny and approval by the Council and the Government. So it is a material consideration. It's got to be taken into account, which is why it's a significant part of this. But I'll hand over to my colleague, Mr. McNair, who can outline how these figures are derived at and what status they have.
Hi. The formula for calculating education contributions is set out in SG 13. Richard Teed's probably best placed as to the justification to ask for the contributions. So we have what's called a pupil product ratio. So it's an average amount of pupils generated from arising from a development, and there's a standard cost per square meterage that's worked out, and that establishes a standard rate. So it's in there. The rates themselves are in SG 13, and I'll have to pass you to Richard as he provided the justification to Brent, the case officer, to ask for the contributions.
Yeah, Councillor Redmond, in answer to your question, where the collective pressure from allocated sites and existing permissions in an area reaches the point that the school is going to be put under pressure and investment's going to be required in capacity, we then apply a pro rata contribution to all the developments that come forward in that area. and that pro rata contribution needs to be worked out per house. But the cost of providing school capacity is something that's calculated per pupil. So what we do is we look at the square metre costs as provided by Scottish Futures Trust, which give us an average cost of delivering school capacity across Scotland. For new schools, we do a slightly different calculation, but for general pro rata contributions, we take 70% of the construction costs, because clearly if we're extending a school, we're not necessarily having to put in new halls and dining facilities and what have you. So we've worked that all very carefully, and it is consistent with all the good advice in this. Our pupil product ratios tell us how many pupils we can expect per house. In terms of a primary school, that's 0.32 pupils per house. For secondary, it's 0.15 pupils. So that gives you an idea as the kind of thresholds that would generate a pupil in terms of new housing. So we can generally expect one primary pupil for every 3 houses. So if we're building 30 houses, then we would expect 10 primary pupils to arise from that development. Now, that might not make a difference to the school's capacity as it currently stands, and you'll see in Bankier Primary School in this particular case is relatively low occupancy currently. However, there is a planning permission for a very large development and also other large allocated sites in this area. So collectively, we would expect well over 200 pupils to arise from these developments, which would then lead to capacity pressures at the schools. So this Gangrew development of 20 to 30 units is going to contribute to that pressure and is subject to developer contributions. The baseline costs for school capacity were calculated in 2018 and have been indexed annually thereafter. So we're confident they represent current construction costs for school capacity. I hope that covers everything.
That's very detailed. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
You even answered my next question. It was going to be the capacity at Bankier School. I suppose it's I was just giving my opinion, but it's quite a difficult situation we're in, because I do agree with the sentiment that these probably are the highest contributions I've seen for a long while. But at the same time, it's hard, because obviously we need to make sure we've got money for our schools, and it's one of the things that might seem, especially with a lot of developments we do, we could grant planning permission, and then it might seem like a lot of the time, but then it could take maybe 5, maybe even 10 years before the developments come forward. So sometimes there needs to be a bit of future proofing in the developer contributions as well, so that inflation doesn't diminish them over time. Obviously, in this particular development, at some developments in the other side of the area, it's they don't have the Den Eastern Access Road, they don't have the Hags Roundabout to consider as well. So it is an expensive area to develop in. And then I suppose, with being a small builder and things, I wouldn't really mind saying, I wouldn't mind them paying less of the contributions if they were getting on and building them quickly. But the thing that really worries me is that I don't think, as a councillor, it should be me that's making the decision on how much reduction we're, and I think that's the main bit of information that's missing. We've got the proposal from officers, which is obviously just totally complying with the guidelines, which is that's their job, that's what they're to do. We don't really seem to have a clear. Sometimes it's saying there should be no contributions, maybe there should be a reduction, but I would never want to say, as a person on the committee, we'll just give them a 10, 20, 30, 50% reduction. That I wouldn't be comfortable doing that. So it would need to be, for me to agree a reduction, it would have to be a proposal backed up by somebody else, whether it would be the district value or whatever. And I suppose it's it's the, there's the, we're saying about the viability of the site and the contributions. If we don't build, we don't get any contributions. So if we make it completely unviable by making the contributions too high, then potentially the site won't get built, and potentially that's not money that's not going to be going towards the roundabout and towards the school, which is maybe a factor. So I would like to see the site coming forward. I would like to see it viable, which I'm sure everyone would like to see it viable, but maybe probably verging more on the continuation side or whatever, because I don't think it's for councillors to decide. Well, it's obviously for us to decide, but I don't think it would be right for anyone on the committee to set the amount of reduction, or I feel like you'd be pulling figures out of the air. I would like an expert opinion on exactly how much contributions would make this site viable and still contribute fairly to the local infrastructure. So I suppose that's really where I'm at with it now.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you. Hopefully, quite quick. One more probably a clarity question. This application is only for two houses. The following one's for 12. There's a single, and there's potentially a 14 house coming. I see that H12 was actually noted for 31 houses, but at the moment we're still going to be under that. I take it that's how Section 75 is worked out, and it's a percentage of you would get in that total area, and obviously that is to discourage. I think it was described as doing 5 at a time, and I'm not saying because there's 19 is obviously the next section of this. Am I correct in that? Number one.
Okay. Richard, can you answer that one?
Councillor Bowes, yeah, you're correct in your assumption. This is a 2-house application. The next one, I believe, is a 19-house application. H12 is allocated, I think, as Mr. Vivian explained earlier, the 2 sites are related. That's why we've had that discussion around Mr. Henderson's explained around the 2 sites being considered for the contributions. And I think applicants also where there may be further development within that site to come. I believe these figures have been arrived at in line with the supplementary guidance and policy based on the numbers of housings within this application. Vivian can confirm that, and he is nodding, so you probably don't have to go to him.
So the individual costs in building 2 houses will obviously be higher than building 19 or 14, as the case may be. Can I ask a question? And I don't know if it's actually for here. I see that Natalie's on the call. But what is the actual impact of not receiving housing developer contributions in Falkirk Council and the community?
Through yourself, Chair?
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the affordable housing policy requires developers who are building houses over 20 homes to contribute towards our affordable housing target, which is currently around 220 per year. Now, that can be delivered in a number of ways. It can be through delivering homes on site. So, for example, the Denny area, there's a requirement for 15% of homes to be of an affordable nature. So generally, our policy and practice as an authority is that any development sites coming through are required under Section 75 to deliver an element of affordable housing, which helps meet our affordable housing supply and, of course, reduce homelessness. Now, in this situation, we do accept that when sites are small, we do consider some flexibility around that, and not frequently, but we do consider the acceptance of a sum of money through the developer contributions. And in this occasion, that is something that we would be willing to consider instead of delivering homes on site. The amount of money that would be determined through the DV evaluation. But if we are not to receive developer contributions for these, both this application and the one that's next on the agenda item. It would mean that that's a detriment to Falkirk Council's housing capital programme of affordability. Members will recall the report that came to committee both in October 2024 for the Strategic Housing Investment Programme and also for the Housing Investment Programme earlier this year, where we did give a commitment to the development of 137 homes in the old Denny High School site. And as such, developer contributions are used financially to offset the cost of developing these sites. So in conclusion, if we are not to receive contributions from this site, we will be at risk of not being able to meet our statutory duty for meeting housing needs. We won't be able to reduce homelessness, and it does call into question the affordability of our council new build programme. That's across the board, and that's the policy that we apply across all developments. So I'm not speaking specifically to this site. It is a broad brush, and for a consistent and fair and equitable approach across all development requests. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
I've quite a few questions, Convener. However, I don't want to ask the questions. If we're going to go to sites and come back, I've asked the questions, then you've lost it. You've lost it again, then you need to ask the questions again. So I would like to decide, I'd like us to decide whether we're continuing or no before asking any questions.
Okay, then just let's clarify the situation. We've got a motion moved and seconded for a continuation and a site visit unaccompanied. Is there anybody otherwise minded at this stage?
Just one question on that. Does time-wise, does it take us to a point of non-determination at all? Because that you've always got to be careful if we do a delay.
Good point.
The applicant had agreed to a number of extensions to the termination date up to a point in time. Off the top of my head, I think we're now beyond the point where an appeal against non-determination could be made.
So therefore, if we do not determine today, then we're getting us in a situation that can just be an appeal for non-determination.
I think we're beyond the point where they could appeal that on that basis.
Thank you, Convener. It was just to pick up on a couple of points around the continuation and just to clarify some points. So there's been a motion by Councillor Kelly, seconded by you, Bailey Buchanan, to continue consideration of the matter to enable the committee to have a site visit to view the physical characteristics of the site. And there was also a request that the district valuer report be provided with the continuation report in the next agenda, or the DV be invited to attend the meeting. And just on the point of the district valuer's report, I think that would be just subject to clarifying with the district valuer that they don't have any objection to the report being made public in the agenda papers. That was a matter that was picked up, probably fairly standard wording about not making it available to third parties without their consent. And I suspect the applicant would also grant their consent. I think it'd be worth officers just clarifying that, as well as it may contain some information that relates to their business affairs. So I think subject to seeking the consent of the district valuer and the applicant, and perhaps just considering if there are any items that may need to be redacted perhaps in the back of those checks, that's something that officers can take forward. So I think in that case, it would be a continuation to allow the committee to view the physical characteristics of the site and to allow officers the opportunity to seek the consent of the district valuer and the applicant to releasing the report along with the next set of agenda papers, and make any appropriate redactions flowing from that, or to request that the district valuer attend the meeting, in which case I suspect we would want the applicant there as well to be able to respond to anything the district valuer may say. But can I take it that was an or that was mentioned? It was either the report or the district valuer in attendance, if they were willing to do so.
Right. The thing about asking the district valuer to be there is so that he can answer any questions. If we are only going on what's on the paper, if there's actually physically somebody here we can say, ask actual questions of.
Okay. So it's a request to ask the district valuer if they can be in attendance. They may say no, but we can ask if they can be in attendance. And again, I'll just reiterate that the applicant would have a right, I think, in procedural fairness terms, to be able to respond to points that were made by the district valuer.
Okay, we've heard Mr. Henderson. Has everybody agreed to the motion?
Convener, I agree with the motion, but I wondered whether there are aspects, because there's some things that I'd like to see included in a further report if you and Councillor Kelly were so minded. And that would be to have, because I think this question about the developer contribution, the potential developer contribution as opposed to Section 75, what Councillor Edmund was saying, I completely agree with in terms of us ourselves being the ones who come up with what a reduction should be, I think is inappropriate. So I wonder if in a future report there could be more development of that from officers about potential options and the context of the wider site as part of the report, and the context of that. I think that having that within a future report would aid with decision making at the time and help us to come to a determination.
Happy to accept that.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Mr. Henderson.
Is that on now? I'll look to summarise that. So it's a site visit to view the physical characteristics of the site, and secondly to ask that the district valuer report be provided with the next set of agenda papers subject to consent of the district valuer and the applicant and any appropriate redactions, and that the officers request that the district valuer attend the meeting to be able to answer questions raised, and also that the officer report provides additional information on potential options regarding contributions and the context of the wider site. Is that a reasonable summary of matters?
Is everybody happy with the content of that?
Happy with that.
Members? Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you for that. Now we're going to have a 10-minute recess. We've not had one this morning. 10-minute recess. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you. We'll now reconvene the meeting, and thanks everybody for the consideration. We now go to item 7, which is construction of 19 dwelling houses at land to the northwest of Fort Gangrew Cottage, Glen View Avenue, Banknote for Hamilton Brown Developments. It's pages 66 to 95. The report is by Brent Vivian. We've also got a deputation request for the same two gentlemen originally. That was Mr. Daniel Henderson, the agent, and Mr. Councillor Brian McCabe, the local member, to be received as a deputation. But before we do that and consider that, I'm going to go to Councillor Kelly.
Considering what we already decided about the previous item, I think it'd be silly if we go ahead with this. We're wasting officers' time, councillors' time, and applicants' time. So I think we should just continue this along with the previous application.
I'm quite happy to support that. How does other members feel? I see everybody nodding their heads. Have agreed to that? Okay, then, just Mr. Henderson, just to clarify that members, motion moved and seconded. It's been by Councillor Kelly and seconded it, that we go for an unaccompanied site visit in relation to this application.
Thank you, convener, and I would expect we would include the same flow-through requests around the district valuer report, the district valuer attending, officer further information on contributions and the context of the wider site.
Okay, happy with that. Okay, thanks everybody for coming along, and they have a safe journey home, and hope you had a happy Easter and you ate plenty of eggs. Thank you.